Well, welcome back to Season 2 of rebuilding my RX-7's 13B Rotary engine at just 20,000 miles. Not something I really wanted to do, but obviously this Rotary had other plans. I imported this thing about 1.5 years ago, and when it came over, I spent about a year with it before experiencing really any issues, but coolant issues started to arise, leading us to having to pull the motor out of the FD. And like I said, I just hit 20,000 miles on it. When I imported it, it only had 17K. So I put a good 3,500 miles on it before needing to pull the engine. So I did get to enjoy it for a little bit. But in case you missed all of the progress we made up until this point, that recap was just a super small, like 20-second snippet of everything we've been through up until this point. Season 1 was about 4 episodes long, each of which was 5 to 6 minutes. So if you have a little bit of time and you want to catch up properly, you want to see every nut and bolt leading up until this point, I highly recommend going to check that out. I'll tag it in the video as well, so you can just head right on over to that playlist and see them all in order. Now this one here, obviously Season 2, we're picking up with the engine off of the car on an engine stand in my garage. So kind of get out of the sunshine and the heat, which is nice for dead of summer. Working in the garage is really nice too, because I'm directly next to the toolbox. I don't have to go back and forth inside and outside. Everything is just exactly where I need it to be. Now, the idea for Season 2 here is to focus on the teardown of the motor and the diagnosis as to what exactly went wrong, so I can go forward into Season 3 knowing exactly what I need to order, get the parts in for the rebuild. Because at this point, really the working theory is that coolant seals went bad, but it might not be that simple, right? Like coolant seals on a 20,000 mile motor, it kind of could make sense, could make a lot of sense, because you know, the engine sat in the car without running for years. I said in one of the previous episodes, that when I got the car, I got all of the maintenance documentation with it, so I can see like all of the maintenance milestones that it hit. And there's not a lot of milestones to be hit, but there is a lot of paperwork. And going through that using my translator, because it is all in Japanese, I was able to figure out that from 1997 to 2010, this car only had about 5,000 kilometers put on it. So with that knowledge, we can, deduce that the internals, like the rotors, the housings, even the apex seals, are probably really in good condition. But what can degrade without running are things that are rubber, gaskets, seals. So I definitely expect the coolant seals to look a little worse for wear, but what we don't know is whether or not the iron cracked. And that's something that can definitely happen when vehicles sit. When you see something sit for so long, the coolant can corrode that metal, and the metal right around where the coolant seals sit is super thin. So I'm hoping once I get this broken down that I won't need new irons, but it's always a possibility. It's something in the back of my mind. So I don't want to start ordering parts until I know exactly what is going wrong with it. And we don't know that until it's cracked open. So the exciting part of this season is seeing all the nuts and bolts come off of the engine itself, the things that kind of put this engine together and make it what it is. I'm so excited to get down to just the bare rotor housings, because this is unlike any other motor in any other car, and I don't have any experience cracking open the keg of a 13B, so I'm really excited to get that under my belt and to show you guys, and to see for the first time the rotors in person and the inner workings of how this crazy Wankel engine came to be. And it's just a bunch of springs and quarter seals and apex seals that really get this thing working and create compression. So really excited to see what that looks like. So if you're interested, follow along, subscribe, follow, comment, let me know how you're feeling about this series, what you'd like to see differently, or anything I could add to spice things up a little bit. I'm always open for feedback like that. My biggest goal here for this is to record everything so that I have a working reference for myself when I go to put it back together, and it's awesome education for everybody else watching as well. So we just saw our upper intake manifold being taken off. That I could have done while the engine was in the car. I decided to keep it on because it also has the mounting points for the engine hoist, and I didn't want to take all that off just to put it back on. I just thought it would be much easier just to keep the upper intake manifold in place. Since I wasn't going to be unplugging anything under it anyway, I wanted to pull the entire engine harness out with the engine, and taking the upper intake manifold off just didn't seem productive if I was just going to pull everything out with the engine anyway. And doing it off car, just a whole lot easier, just less time I had to spend in the sun and under the hood, and just, getting everything with an awkward position. So this makes it so much easier to do when it's on the engine stand. And the upper intake manifold is probably the only thing on the actual engine I have experience taking on and off. I've done that probably 3 or 4 times at this point because I installed my Haltech ECU along with some AEM gauges, and to track all the boost pressure, you had to do an intake temperature sensor underneath of the manifold itself for the Haltech to communicate. So there was a couple of things I had to do under there. Plus I had to replace a turbo boost solenoid under there as well. So I'm super familiar with taking that on and off. And then once that got out of the way, I was able to take off the alternator, which is just 2 bolts, super simple job. The real fun starts with the turbos. Now, this being almost a completely stock motor, I don't know if I mentioned that, but it is almost a completely stock motor. It had an aftermarket intake manifold, an aftermarket cold air intake and an aftermarket intercooler. But other than that, mostly bone stock, with the exception of those things and the Haltech I just mentioned. And I haven't seen the stock twins myself in person clear as day because they're pretty hidden under the hood. Can't really get to them, can't really see them as much. So I'm really excited about this portion of the video here where I start to take off things like the discharge pipes, and I get to disconnect like the oil return feeds or the oil feeds for the turbos, the front and rear, and then you really get to expose those turbine housings. You can see the turbines inside the turbos, and that was I think just a really exciting, like, awoke my like inner child in me, because you see these like on TV, but I didn't really see this in person up until this point, at least on this car, I mean, up until this point, because they're so hidden. And they're tiny suckers too, like these are really small turbos. If you're not familiar, I don't know, you might be watching this and you're not super familiar with the inner workings of the 13B, the rotary in the RX-7s. These have a sequential twin turbo system from the factory. I don't know the exact size of the turbos, but they're super small and they work in sequence. So the sequential turbos, the primary turbo, the first one, will operate up to about 4,500 RPMs, and then the secondary turbo will kick on and pick up the slack from there up through the high end of the RPM band. And that's going to basically help reduce turbo lag, but also make it just a completely smooth transition all the way through the RPM band. So you get good low end, decent low end, I should say, not good, decent low end with the first turbo, but then you really get things going when the second one kicks on at mid to the high range of the RPM. So that's kind of the idea that what you're working with here. Now, going into this, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep the stock twins or upgrade to a single turbo, because obviously upgrading to the single turbo now would be ideal because everything's taken apart, the engine's out of the car, and everything's just going to be easier to work on at this point. But I get a lot of comments about this. Oh, you might as well go single turbo. You might as well do this and that while the engine's out. And yeah, you might as well in terms of efficiency, but you got to remember the cost, guys. Like, going single turbo is not just, oh, let's just slap a single, we're talking about $3,000+ for a turbo system, plus all the fabrication work you have to do. Like, it's not just as easy as, oh, you might as well single turbo while you're here. I would love to. I'm just not sure at this point. I wish I could give you a straight answer as something to look forward to in the upcoming episodes. I wish I could say, hey, I'm going to upgrade this, this, and this, and it's going to be a high horsepower, blah, blah, blah. I don't know at this point. The idea here for season 2 is tear down, diagnose, because the diagnosis is really going to determine how much money has to be spent just to fix the engine, just to rebuild the engine to where it's operational. And then from there, I can determine whether or not the budget allows for a single turbo, or if I want to upgrade the twins, or maybe I just want to take the twins and make them non-sequential just to reduce or eliminate some of that rat's nest that we all know and love with the rotaries. I'm just not sure yet. So I'm looking forward to breaking it open and seeing what it is so that I can kind of get a better idea of what that budget looks like and what room it'll allow for future upgrades, whether it be now or in the future. And something that I always said about this car is always, because it was such low miles, and now it's not super relevant anymore because I am doing a rebuild, but I always said that I was going to enjoy the OEM to OEM plus nature of the build until I needed a rebuild, until I inevitably blew an apex seal or lost compression, for one reason or another. But I always said that when it came to that point, then I would look into maybe doing a single turbo or something like that. But my idea here is I really just want to keep it reliable, and going single turbo doesn't necessarily mean unreliable, but it opens up the possibility of pushing it too far beyond where it needs to be in order to keep it reliable, because I do want to keep it to a point where I can take it to the store easily and not have to worry about it. So I think at this point here is my current theory, my current wish list, I guess you could say, is what I want out of this car is a nice sound, and something that you get from a port is a nice sound. So I'm thinking about porting it. I'm thinking street port on the primaries, small, super small bridge port on the secondaries. And I think that's going to get me where I want to be, because if you do too big of a port on the primaries and the secondaries, like a full bridge, even a half bridge, you start getting into the part of the low end power being a little bit less drive. You lose drivability on the low end, and that's not what I want, right? You spend a lot of time going to the store on the low end. I'm not taking this thing to the track very often, if ever. That's not my thing. So I'm thinking small street port on the primaries, small half bridge on the secondaries. That'll get me where I want to be sound wise, and it'll keep me where I want to be reliability wise. Otherwise, I think I'm probably going to look into going non-sequential for the turbos, just to remove some of that rat's nest that we're going to see in just a little bit, because it's a mess, man. There is, I don't know the statistic, but I think it's like 7 feet of vacuum line through this engine. It's a ridiculous amount of vacuum line. So I'd love to simplify that. And who knows, maybe it ends up being with a single turbo. I think not. I think it'll probably be keeping the stock twins. Ultimately, I can upgrade that later if I want to. One of the other things I want to do is a cooling mod, a V-mount, intercooler radiator setup. They're super expensive, so that's something that I'm considering. Obviously, once I get the breakdown of how much the rebuild itself is going to cost, whether I need new irons or if it's just something as simple as seals and gaskets, we'll see when we get there. But a V-mount would be super awesome. So anyway, if you're interested in following along this build, just to entertain my ideas as we go along, let me know in the comments what you think. Obviously keeping budget in mind. I know it's super easy to say go single turbo, but let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe. Obviously follow along. I'd really appreciate it. Putting a lot of effort into this, and I'm really excited to go forward with it.